So what are some of the questions to refine your TAM, SAM, SOM? So how would you sort of like give these, this is the framework to think about those, and because Google search will not work over there.
So I think every startup is different. So, but the general principles, and let me start with what I see happening a lot, where I find there are a lot of mistakes. So what'll happen is a founder will say, I sell iPhone cases, okay, and I sell them for $1. And what they'll do is they'll start doing a Google search of the iPhone or smartphone market. And smartphones are selling for a lot more than an iPhone case, right? So what they're doing is they're taking the entire smartphone market at smartphone prices, and they're creating their TAM, which is really comparing apples and bowling balls. It doesn't match up. So I think that the first thing that you want to do is you want to lock in your price point. And then you want to find the largest user base that you can find, which is going to be your TAM. So you're going to take those users, and this is a very oversimplification of the whole thing, but you take those users times the price of your product. What can you get for your product? And that creates your TAM. Your SAM starts to become a segmentation where you're saying, you know what? We can't go after, with our limited resources, limited funds, we can't go after the entire world or the entire smartphone market. So we're going to segment, and we think we have the best chance in going after this type of client. This client will be really good for us, and we'll be really good for them. And then your SOM becomes what you can actually capture. So what I think that people need to prepare is they need to prepare their product pricing. They need to prepare their go-to-market strategy as far as your segmentation, and they need to prepare their projections. So they need to understand, how are we going to ramp up and where are we going to get to? And I think those are the preparation points for doing that.
Well, okay, awesome. So coming to your another tweet, or your thing that you mentioned, is a pitch deck is not 13 slides. A pitch deck is 3 micro stories.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So a lot of times I'll see all of these pitch deck templates out there, and all these pitch decks, like from Y Combinator, they have their series, which is great. This is how you do a pitch. But what I really want people to get across is it's not how many slides. And I believe you should have around 13 slides. You shouldn't have 20 or 40 slides. But within those 13 slides, it's not so much about checking the boxes for each slide. It's about telling 3 micro stories. So your 3 micro stories are your opportunity story. Your second story is your financial story. And your third story is your credibility story. And basically how I like to position it is, your opportunity story is, here's our problem, here's our solution, and here's how big the market is of the people that have the problem. So there's an opportunity here, and it's big enough opportunity. The second is the financials, which really starts with the TAM, SAM, and SOM, your market. So this is how big it is. This is what we charge. This is what we're projecting in X amount of years, right? So here's the financial story. And then the third story is the credibility story. This is how we plan to go get customers. This is what we've done so far, and this is our team. And so if you're looking at telling those stories, it almost doesn't really matter how many slides you have, as long as you're focused on telling those stories. Because if you're not focused on those stories, or you don't go back and look at the entire deck and say, do I have these 3 stories or don't I have 3 stories? You're creating just these siloed slides that don't connect to each other. And then it helps you when you're crafting your story to craft it in that way.
Okay, that's awesome. So obviously when you're pitching it, and your idea is pitch your startup like your phone is about to die.
Yeah. So that really comes down to, when you're pitching your startup, don't create a 43-page deck. Pitch it in a really concise way. And what I do is, on every one of my slides, I normally have what I call a power statement. I can read the power statements from every slide, and in 1 minute get the entire gist of the startup concept, right? And that's what we really want founders to do. So for example, if you have a founder, they're going to spend, or if you have an investor, they're going to spend about a minute on the deck. They're going to skim the deck to see if it meets their criteria for their portfolio, okay? If it doesn't, it's going to go in the garbage. If it does, you may get the phone call. All you're trying to do is get to that phone call, right? So I had a customer that I was working with that I was a founder. He had a 43 slide deck. It was wall-to-wall copy. And so I was doing a review with him, and I stopped him at like 27 slides. I'm like, my man, you got to stop here. Like, you're dead in the water with this deck. So he was having a hard time raising money. So he and I wound up building a 13 slide deck. He recirculated to the exact same investors, and he was able to get 10 meetings, and he raised his full round inside of 14 days, checks in hand. So the difference between having an investor look at your deck and try and read everything and learn everything about your business is not the opportunity. The opportunity is to give them the condensed version, to tease them into this idea of this startup, see if it meets their criteria, and get to that next phone call. And that's your whole objective.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. So in terms of questions, you may ask before starting working with anybody. So what are those questions? What are your favorite questions I ask before you take on a client?
I like to understand what they've done so far. So I like to understand where they are in the process. I like to understand, sometimes people come to me with just an idea. So for an example, a client that I didn't initially take, they came to me with the example where it was just in the idea phase. And I told them, you're at a point where you don't have enough information to create a deck. So what I wound up doing with them is I wound up working with them for a while, and I kind of acted a bit as a co-founder and helped them flesh out the idea. And then from there, we got it to a point where we could build a deck. So really what I'm looking for is I'm looking for people that have a full concept. And then from there, we can refine, because I've been in the startup world. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I've started companies. I've taken companies apart, rebuilt them, and sold them. Like I've gone through all the pieces, and they tend to be a Swiss Army knife for startups. So I understand branding, marketing, process, and I love all the pieces of it. I've been in the CEO seat, I've been in the chief strategy officer seat, and everything in between. So what I'm able to do is work with the founders to find where their holes are. And a lot of times it's not in the general concept, it's in the little pieces. It's in their business model, it's in their go-to-market strategy, it's in their whatever the pieces are. And so to give you an example, there was a group that came to me that had a technology, and they were having a hard time raising money. And they were asking me, why do you think we're having a hard time raising money? And the primary reason was their business model. I convinced them to change their business model into a licensing model. I said, redo your projections, change this to a licensing model. I think you're going to see your profit margins go way up. You're going to make a ton of money. And I think the market is going to be more interested in this concept. We rebuilt their deck, and they were able to raise money where they weren't able to raise money for like 6 months. And so as soon as they changed the concept, they were able to raise money. So when I talk to a client from the initial standpoint, I'm doing a little bit of the business evaluation. I give them my honest feedback on it. It doesn't mean I'm always going to be right, but I give them my honest feedback on it, and I try and help them fine tune. But you need to come with a complete concept. It needs to be a complete solution, and then we can kind of fine tune the pieces.